Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Podcast by Canada Soccer Files. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Connor. We are previewing Copa America 2021 with a group-by-group preview. You may also want to check out our Euro 2020 group-by-group preview, which is available now on YouTube and will soon be available in various podcast platforms.
Yeah, today we're going to be previewing Group B of Copa America 2021. And within that, we'll do a team-by-team overview. And we'll do an overview of players also, but that will be fairly superficial because we're considering a deeper dive podcast into that.
So yeah, we'll go through our podcast today in three parts. So part one, we will begin with an overview of the group, looking at the rankings, the odds, the head-to-head records, and a comparison of the size of each country.
Right, and then part two will be the deep dive, basically a team-by-team overview, and we'll be looking at their long history in the World Cup and the Copa America, and their recent history, and then a brief overview of their players.
Yeah, and finally, part three will be a discussion of each team's prospects, as well as our predictions for the group.
Okay, and I got this Euro shirt for my birthday at the beginning of June, and I'm all proud of it, which is why I've been wearing it for the last couple of podcasts. How about you, Connor? I see a little red in there.
Yeah, like you, I'm staying neutral. I'm staying out of South America. I'm wearing my South Korea shirt.
The Red Devils.
Yes. Yeah, should make you happy given that you live there.
It does. That's great. Okay, let's move on to part one of the podcast, and let's get an overview of the teams.
Right, so Group B, which is also known as the North Zone, contains Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela.
Okay, Brazil are the defending champions, and they'll be hosting the tournament for the second time in a row. This comes after the tournament was moved from the scheduled co-hosts Colombia and Argentina just within the past couple of weeks.
Right. Yeah, Colombia, their only victory in the Copa America came in 2001, which also happens to be the only time they hosted the tournament.
Okay, and the third team is Ecuador. They've never won the Copa America. They've not even made it past the quarterfinal stage in this tournament. Since 1993 when they hosted.
Next is Peru. Their last title came 45 years ago in 1975, but they were the beaten finalists in the most recent Copa America in 2019. They have also reached the semifinals in 3 of the last 4 tournaments.
Okay, and finally is Venezuela, who, along with Ecuador, are the only South American team never to have won the Copa America. Their best recent performance was
a fourth place finish. Sorry, I'll take your line there. It was a 4th place finish in 2011.
That's right. Okay. Let's go on to the rankings of the teams.
Sure. So starting with Brazil, they are ranked 3rd in the world by FIFA and 1st according to the ELO ranking system. So either way, they're the top ranked team in South America. Brazil had been in the top 3 in both ranking systems since December 2016. However, they haven't been top in the FIFA ranking since December 2006, an honor which they held for 4 years there from the time they won the World Cup in 2002. Brazil somehow dropped to 22nd in FIFA rankings in June 2013, which I can't really explain, especially as they were 3rd in ELO at the time.
Right, and that was just before a World Cup. And I see in December 2001, they had a weird thing. In FIFA rankings, they dropped from 1st, which they were consistently at, to 3rd. But in ELO rankings, they dropped from 2nd in December 2000 to 15th in 2001, and then back to 1st, I guess, after winning the World Cup. And I double-checked it because it seemed so weird. But it wasn't a mistake.
Very interesting.
All right. How about Colombia? Sorry.
Yeah, Colombia. They are 15th according to FIFA and 13th in the ELO ranking systems. In both systems, they rank 4th overall in South America. behind Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay. They were as high as third and fifth, respectively, following a great showing in the 2014 World Cup. While they've generally been in the top 15 in both ranking systems since 2012, over the course of the decade before that, they bounced between roughly 20th and 50th in FIFA and 20th to 35th in ELO. So they're kind of enjoying a good period right now.
Yeah, and they did bounce around quite a bit before the turn of the millennium too. So that seems to be a defining feature of Colombia. Should we move on to Ecuador?
Yeah, Ecuador are 53rd in FIFA, but they're significantly higher. They're 20th in ELO, so quite a bit of discrepancy there. Recently, their highest position came in 2015 when they reached 13th and 12th, respectively. But they dropped to 70th in FIFA by December 2017 and to a low of 39th in ELO in June 2019. So they've managed to rise in both systems over the past couple of years.
Yeah, but they've been fairly consistently, I would say, around 20th in ELO rankings, but just jumping around like crazy in the FIFA rankings. So that's one of the reasons I think we like ELO a bit more.
Yeah, it tends to be a bit less volatile, we find.
Team number 4 is Peru.
Peru are 27th in FIFA rankings and 32nd according to ELO. So interestingly, while they're 25 places higher than Ecuador in the FIFA rankings, they're 12 places below them in ELO. They're the second lowest South America team in ELO. So I'm not sure if ELO is quite as reliable as we usually find it to be, given their strong recent performances, which we've talked about. They reached 11th and 12th around the time of the 2018 World Cup, but that was a high point for them, having climbed from 47th and 23rd in December 2015.
Yeah, I wonder if FIFA is maybe overvaluing or anyway putting a heavier weight on them being finalists in 2019.
Yeah, and perhaps making the World Cup as well in 2018.
Yeah, that's right. The recent results being valued a bit more by FIFA. Let's take a look at Venezuela.
Venezuela are 30th in FIFA and 29th in ELO, which is where they've been kind of fairly steadily over the past 3 years. But this is a good historical period for them. They were 83rd in FIFA and 58th in ELO in 2015. And at the start of the century, they were 111th in FIFA and 103rd in ELO.
Yeah, I wonder if they're the only South American team that has gone below 100. That's seems a bit odd. I mean, South American teams are fairly strong on the whole. Do you know, Connor? Maybe Bolivia?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Bolivia, who we discussed in Group A, did drop below 100. But you're right. It's quite unusual to find a South American team below 100 in the rankings.
Yeah, actually, on that note, Guyana and Suriname are both in South America. So I wonder if we should be careful to say the CONMEBOL teams.
True. Yeah, that's right. Guyana and Suriname compete in CONCACAF, so in the North and Central America region.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, let's move on to the odds. And this is the odds for winning the whole tournament rather than winning the group, which we did in the Euro previews.
Yeah, so the odds basically reflect the return on a dollar investment, basically. So Brazil has the best odds of any team in the tournament at a dollar returning about 228. Colombia is the third best in South America at 724. So just behind Argentina, or a little bit behind Argentina, but ahead of Uruguay. Then it drops off. We get kind of more to the long shot teams to win it. Ecuador and Peru both around 38 to 39. And then Venezuela are real outsiders among teams in this group with odds of around 64 to 1. However, they're far ahead of Bolivia, who are 190 to 6-1, but they're in Group A. So
All
what
right.
do you make of that?
Well, I was just going to ask you, if you were a betting man, would you take any of these odds?
I mean, Brazil, not a great return, but would be the safe bet here. Colombia would perhaps be the only other team I'd put a dollar on. But when we discuss prospects, I might say why later, why I might advise against that. The odds, kind of interestingly, they don't strictly follow the FIFA rankings. They're a little bit more in line with ELO. But yeah, they're not. It's not a true reflection of where each team is ranked, which is kind of interesting as well.
Yeah. Well, my money's on Venezuela all the way. Well,
We'll see.
Not to win the whole tournament, but actually, my money would be on Venezuela to beat out Peru here. We'll get into that later, I suppose.
All right. Do you want to take us through the head-to-head records?
Yeah, let's take a look at their head-to-heads. Well, as one might guess, Brazil has a better head-to-head record than all of these teams. And I'll just cover basically the major games between them. Brazil against Colombia has 11 wins, but 7 draws and 2 losses. So they draw more than one would guess. The 2003 Gold Cup final, quarterfinal they met in. We'll talk about the Gold Cup a little bit because a couple of teams have joined it. Brazil won that. And they also won the World Cup quarterfinal against Colombia. That was in Brazil, where they won 2-1. And maybe the other thing I'll mention is the 2015 Copa America group stage. Brazil lost that one on neutral ground. They lost a game to Colombia. Brazil has a better record than Ecuador, quite a bit. 12 wins, 3 draws, and 2 losses. And the only thing worth mentioning there is that they tied in the group stage of the 2016 Copa America. It's a bit more interesting with Peru. They have 17 wins, 6 ties, and 2 losses. But interestingly, Peru tend to win the big games. So in the 2016 Copa America group stage, there was a famous kind of handball, a controversial handball goal by, I think it was Paulo Guerrero, that caused Germany to lose 1-0 there. Sorry, Brazil to lose 1-0. And of course, in the final of the 2000 Copa America, Brazil won that 3-0. Interesting one in 1975, the Copa America semi-final. At that time, they played home and away. There was no kind of host country. So in the home leg, Brazil lost 3-1, but then they won 2-0 in the away leg. And they were considered tied because they didn't do goal difference or away goals. So Peru advanced on lots. Do you know what lots are, Connor?
Well, it can be different things. It can be picking something out of a hat or flipping a coin. So the gods were on their side there.
Yeah, whatever it was. Against Venezuela, Brazil have a thunderous 22 wins and 3 draws. And 2 of those draws, though, were fairly recently. In the Copa America group stage in 2011, they tied. And again, in the recent 2019 Copa America group stage, they also tied 0-0 in both cases. Colombia has a winning record over Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela. We saw they had a losing record over Brazil. Against Ecuador, it's 15 wins, 6 draws, and 5 losses. And the only one I'll mention there is actually their recent 2022 World Cup qualification. Ecuador won that 6-1, thrashing Colombia there. Did you know about that, Connor?
Yeah, I had been keeping an eye on the recent scores, but what a result. What a shock.
A real shock. Yeah, Colombia versus Peru is 15 wins, 11 draws, and 7 losses. So pretty competitive between those. In the 2000 Gold Cup, they met in the semi-final. Gold Cup being the CONCACAF championship, not the South American one. Colombia won that one. They also had an interesting final in the 1975 Copa America. Again, it was home and away, and Colombia won at home but lost away. And then they played a third game in Venezuela, I believe it was, and Colombia lost in the final there. Okay, and moving on to Colombia and Venezuela, that is 12 wins, 7 draws, and 4 losses. And that's kind of interesting because Colombia won all of Colombia didn't lose to Venezuela until 2006. But since that time, they have a losing record against Venezuela. So kind of an interesting history there. Ecuador and Peru are fairly even, but Ecuador has the edge with 7 wins, 6 draws, and 4 losses. Nothing really to talk about there because they tend not to reach far into the Copa America. So those are usually qualifying or group stage games. Same with Ecuador versus Venezuela. Ecuador has 10 wins, 2 draws, and 5 losses. So have the better record. And finally, Peru versus Venezuela. Peru has 13 wins, 5 draws, and 5 losses. So we can see across that they tend to share points quite a bit. There's not often the case where a team really crushes another every time.
Yeah, except for Brazil. The other 4 teams, lots of results going back and forth there.
Yeah, you're right. Not many wins against Brazil. A couple of teams, Colombia and Peru, have more ties against them, but all right. Well, that was longer than I expected. Let's go on to the size and population of each country.
Sure. Starting with Brazil. Brazil has 212 million people. So it's by far the largest country in South America by population. In fact, about half of South America's population lives in Brazil. Brazil is the sixth most populous country in the world. And they're also the largest in South America in terms of size, about 3 times the size of Argentina. Colombia has 51 million people. They're the second most populous country in South America, but they still have only about a quarter of the population that Brazil has.
Wow.
Moving on to Ecuador, they have 17 million people. It's the smallest country in terms of population in this group, but it's ranked 7th out of 10 in terms of CONMEBOL countries. Its capital, Quito, is one of the highest cities in the world at over 2,700 meters above sea level. And it's also the closest capital city in the world to the equator.
Oh, that's interesting.
Some fun facts there.
Yeah, that elevation tends to give them a bit of an advantage at home, hey?
It does, yeah. The only capital city higher is La Paz in Bolivia, and we certainly saw last time that Bolivia has a much better home record as well.
Yeah, that's right. How about Peru?
Peru has 33 million people, so it's the 4th most populous country in South America. It's also the 3rd largest in terms of area. And then Venezuela has 28.5 million people. Its population has actually declined from around 30 million people a few years ago due to a lot of refugees leaving the country because of political instability. So just in summary, Brazil has 212 million people, Colombia 51 million. Then 3rd is Peru with 33, Venezuela not far behind with 28.5, and Ecuador being the smallest country with just 17 million people.
Wow, interesting. I didn't actually know. I thought Venezuela was the smallest population-wise.
Yeah, kind of an average-sized country for South America.
Okay.
Right. Let's go on to part 2, our team-by-team overview.
Okay, and we try to start with a nickname. Does Brazil, I know they have a nickname, and do they use it Connor?
They do. I'm going to butcher the Portuguese, but it's the Seleção, which basically means a selection, and that's used to refer to the final squad kind of any Brazilian team. They have a couple other nicknames, but that's the one I'd be most familiar with, and I think is the most used in Brazil.
Yeah, I have heard that one before. Let's get into their history. So I'm going to divide this into 4 parts, and the first one is an overview of their tournament participation and their major achievements. The second part deals with their World Cup record. We'll keep that short and focus a little bit more on their Copa America record, which is the third part. And then finally, we'll have some summary comments and maybe a look toward their future prospects. But back to part 1, the tournament participation and overview of major achievements. They're considered the most successful soccer team in the world, not only because they won the World Cup 5 times, which is more than any other country, but because they have placed in the top 3 9 times in 9 World Cups. So they didn't win when they most wanted to, though. Both times they hosted the Cup, it met with disappointment. We'll get into that in their World Cup history. At the regional level, they withdrew from most of the Cups in the 1920s and also from a few Cups after that. 5 Cups in all between 1939 and 1967. They've won 9 titles in this competition, including 5 of the last 9 tournaments. Surprisingly, though, they are not the dominant team in Copa America history. There are, in fact, 2 teams ahead of them.
Interesting. Do you want to take us through their World Cup history?
Yeah, let's take a look at that. Not only have they entered every edition of the World Cup, but they only team to successfully qualify for every one of them. They weren't a dominant team in the early years, though, getting knocked out at the group stage in each of the first 3 competitions. Okay, I think I have the wrong graphic there, Connor. So we'll just have to forget about the graphic and carry on. The first post-war Cup was supposed to rectify this, but 1950 proved a painful disappointment known as the Maracanazo, which they lost, suffering a famous loss at the hands of Uruguay. 1958 to 74 saw 3 titles out of 4 and set Brazil on top of the world in terms of football. Ironically, the only tournament they did not win, 1966 in England, saw them knocked out at the group stage. And that's something that hasn't happened since 1966. Further wins in 1994 and 2002 established them as the most successful soccer nation with 5 titles. However, 2014 saw them hosting again, and just like in 1950, it ended in tears. Expectations of glory became humiliation with a shocking 7-1 loss to Germany in the semi-final. An imperious qualification gave hope in 2018, but then they were knocked out in the quarterfinals by Belgium. Their 5 titles, along with 2 second-place finishes, though, still has them on top of the world.
Right. I'll just take a quick glance at their more recent history. So yeah, in 2014, when they hosted, they breezed through the group stage. In the knockout round, they twice met South American opposition. They first required penalties to beat Chile in the round of 16, and then held off Colombia in the quarterfinals in a game which famously saw Neymar injured late on after getting kneed in the back by Camilo Zaniga. And then, of course, as you mentioned, they lost 7-1 in one of the most infamous games in World Cup history. In 2018, Brazil qualified impressively, as you alluded to, winning 12 and losing only 1 of their 18 games. They won their World Cup group ahead of Switzerland, Serbia, and Costa Rica. They then beat Mexico in the round of 16, but as you mentioned, they were undone by Belgium at the quarterfinal stage. So a bit of disappointment for them not to at least reach the last 4.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's move on to the Copa America history. And ironically, as I said, they're not at the top of Copa America. I hope I have the right graphic here. I do. Uruguay and Argentina have won the Copa America more often, 15 times and 14 times respectively. That compares, as I said, to Brazil's 8 titles. They won twice in the early years in 1919 and 1922, only once in a long drought between 1923 and 1987. They won in 1949 during that period. And in 1989, they won again. And then it was a run of 4 out of 5 between 1997 and 2007. So the 3 editions after that were disappointing quarterfinal finishes, followed by a knockout at the group stage in the 2016 Copa America Centenario for only the second time in their long history. Can you believe that? Just twice that they were knocked out at the group stage.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
In 2016, they tied Ecuador 0-0. They thrashed Haiti 7-1, but then they lost to Peru in that controversial game you described earlier. So they finished 3rd out of 4 in the group and did not advance. In 2019, Brazil hosted and won the tournament. They won their group ahead of Bolivia, Venezuela, and Peru. So 2 teams they meet again here. They beat Paraguay on penalties, beat Argentina 2-0 in the semifinals, and then beat Peru for the second time in the tournament, 3-1 in the final. So of the last 9 tournaments, or the last 9 Copa Americas, Brazil have won 5 of them, but in the other 4, they have failed to advance beyond the quarterfinal stage.
Yeah, that's right.
Kind of interesting. When they do well, they do really well, and other than that, they tend to be a little bit flat.
Yeah, that's right. And I think Paraguay on penalties we mentioned in the last podcast is kind of a feature of the recent Copa Americas. I think they lost to them twice. Is that right?
Yes, I believe that's correct. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. Okay, let's do a few summary comments, or in this case, there's a couple of interesting details I want to tell you about. They have been successful in other competitions. Until 2013, they were the only nation to have participated in all 7 Confederation Cups. But 2017, I think that's the last Confederation Cup. That became the only time they didn't qualify. So they won that 4 times, including 3 in a row, 2005, 2009, 2013. And if you don't know what that is, Connor, can you tell us what a Confederations Cup is?
Yeah, so the Confederations Cup is kind of seen as a World Cup warm-up tournament for whoever's hosting. So it's generally played the year before a World Cup. And it involves the host country for the upcoming World Cup, the previous World Cup winners, and then the 6 winners of the regional competitions. So Brazil, having won, again, 5 of the last 9 tournaments, have made regular appearances at that Confederations Cup.
That's right. Yeah, they also reached the final of the CONCACAF Gold Cup. That's the North American Regional Cup, North and Central American. They reached the final 2 out of the 3 times they participated in 1996 and 2003. But we haven't seen a South American team participate in that for quite a while. Another singular accomplishment, and I'm not sure if you know this, Connor, is that they're the only non-European team to win a World Cup in Europe.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's in Europe, it's always been a European team. And until recently, outside of Europe, it was always a team outside of Europe, but that changed in the last decade. Anyway, Brazil can't be described as having a weak period. because success or failure does not correlate well between global and regional competitions. For example, we saw they had a very long dry spell in South American competition, but that was actually their strongest global period, at least from 1958 to 1970. So a bit of a mismatch there. It could be argued that their current period, maybe before the Copa America in 2019, was their first weak period. Do you think so, Connor?
I think you could look at it. I mean, they so consistently reach finals or win tournaments that to not really advance beyond the quarterfinals in the World Cup or the Copa America for a couple years in a row, would certainly be considered a dry spell in the context of their long and glorious history.
Yeah. Anyway, if there was a slump since 2007, they may be emerging from it. Kind of interestingly, we talked about winners within Europe and winners outside of Europe. The next two World Cups take place outside of Europe. So I'm sure Brazil is conscious of that and of the possibility they can do well. So 2022 is in Qatar and 2026 is in North America. So they're still, I think, stinging a little from that humiliating 7-1 loss at home to Germany in the 2014 World Cup. But it is said of Brazil that the English invented it and the Brazilians perfected it.
Hard to argue.
Okay, well, that is their long history. Let's take a look at their more recent history.
We say recent history. When we look at friendlies, their last round of friendlies was at the end of 2019. Like most countries in South America, they played almost no international games for over a year through most of 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And more recently, the games have been competitive matches in 2022 World Cup qualifying. But taking a look at those friendlies in 2019, there were 6 of them. They actually only won 1 of them, a win against South Korea. Other than that, they had a couple draws and losses. So it's questionable whether they brought their strongest team to those friendlies because they have so many players to choose from.
Right. Well, things have changed since there. There's the 2022 World Cup qualifying. Let's take a look at that, Connor.
Yeah, Brazil have a perfect 6 wins from 6 games in World Cup qualifying so far. So they're the only team to collect a full 18 points, and after 6 matches, sit 6 points ahead of Argentina, who are in second place. They didn't have to qualify for the 2014 World Cup. They qualified very impressively for 2018, and they seem to be on the right path again for 2022.
Yeah, we didn't talk about their qualifying history that much, but 2018 and this one are really impressive. It's usually not that way. They do win from time to time, but not by this much. And sometimes they're not the first team. They're a bit down the table.
Yeah, it's an interesting format in CONMEBOL with 10 teams, each playing each other twice home and away, once each. So yeah, over the course of 18 games, it's almost like a mini league. So it's quite an interesting one to follow.
I really like it. And I think they can afford to do this because there's no qualifying for Copa America. So I think they're always the first to start.
Yeah, they need the extra time to fit so many games in.
Let's take a look at their scorers in the World Cup so far. Of course, Neymar at the top with 5 goals. You can talk a little bit about these players, Connor?
Yeah, Neymar's really their talisman. He's now 29 years old, so he's no longer a young player, even though he burst on the scene so young. He's got 66 goals in 105 games for Brazil. That's second overall on their all-time scorer list, and only 11 behind the great Pelé. So it's conceivable that he will pass Pelé as the all-time leading goal scorer.
No.
Yeah, wouldn't that be something? That record's held for so long. Also looking on their goal scoring list, Firmino and Richarlison, players with Liverpool and Everton, They're both important players for Brazil, an average around a goal every 3 games. And then Vicinius Jr., he's a name not on the list. He's 20 years old, and he's already made 82 appearances for Real Madrid, but he has just 1 cap for Brazil. So that just shows the depth of scoring and the talent of forwards that Brazil has at the moment, that someone like Vicinius Jr. can't get into the team.
Yeah, that's something I think we would get into in the deep dive. Maybe more interesting than who plays for Brazil is who doesn't play for them, because they're just some huge names who don't make the national team.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, we spent a long time on Brazil. We should move on to Colombia. And again, sorry, yes, the nicknames. You're going to tell us the nickname.
Yes, the nickname for Colombia is Los Cafeteros. Again, sorry about the pronunciation, but it translates to the coffee makers.
Not sure I've heard that one.
I'm not sure I have either. It does make sense. So much coffee has grown there.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Okay, well, let's do our 4 parts, starting with their participation and major achievement. Their first international game was in 1958, but they were slow to enter the first World Cup. Sorry, I may have gotten there. Not 1950. Anyway, the first World Cup they entered was 1958. They withdrew in 1938. So obviously their first game would have been before that. Their participation in South American competition began in 1945, but it was very scattered until 1963, from which time they participated consistently. So I think what I meant to say is basically they were a bit slow to enter both tournaments. 2 quarterfinal finishes are their best result in World Cup competition, while they have 1 Copa America from when they hosted in 2001, and they also had a 2nd place finish in 1975.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at the. Did you say weight?
No, I said carry on.
Okay, great. Okay, I thought I was doing the wrong team or something. Let's take a look at the World Cup. They qualified for the 1962 World Cup, which took place in Chile, but then not again until 1990, when they earned the first of 3 qualifications in a row. Only in 1990 did they pass the group stage, but they're better known for going out with a bang in 1994. That was a terrible pun. I regret it. The team had shown great promise, but an own goal in their group game with host USA spelled the end of their campaign, and it also ended with the player being shot shortly after returning home. Do you know that story, Connor?
Yes. Escobar, I think, was the name of the player.
Yeah, I don't remember myself. You could be right. That sounds familiar. Anyway, from 2002 to 2010, they narrowly missed 3 World Cups in a row. So they were well deserving when they made it in 2014. And I think you're going to take it from there, Connor.
Yeah, in 2014 in the World Cup, they won all 3 group games against Greece, Ivory Coast, and Japan. They beat Uruguay 2-0 in the round of 16, but then went out to Brazil. However, it was still a good tournament for them, and James Rodriguez won the Golden Boot for that World Cup, scoring 6 goals. In 2018, Colombia topped the group ahead of Japan, Senegal, and Poland. They met England in the round of 16 in what turned out to be an ill-tempered game. Colombia scored a 93rd minute equalizer, which ultimately brought the game to penalties, but there they were defeated by England.
All right. I didn't realize they had played Japan twice in a row. And they also played them in the 2019 Copa America, did they? I don't know, but Japan was there.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop with those kind of comments and get on with the Copa America history. So actually, they were really weak in the early years. They they withdrew from half of the cups and they earned only fifth place at best. It was therefore a surprise in 1975 when they took second place. They weren't even hosts. As in World Cup competition, the 1990s was a very strong period, starting with third place in the 1987 Copa America, and then achieving that 3 out of 5 times to 1995, and later winning their only title in 2001. But in that case, they were aided by hosting. They have dropped off since, a bit disappointingly so, given their promising teams in 2011 and 2015, but they nevertheless continue to pass the group stage, and they took third place once again in 2016.
Yeah, in that tournament, the Centenario, they lost to Chile in the semifinals, and then played U.S. in the third place match.
Right. How about 2019?
Yeah, so in 2019, they dominated their group. They posted 3 clean sheet victories over Argentina, Qatar, and Paraguay. However, they tied Chile 0-0 in the quarterfinals and then lost 5-4 in penalties. So they actually exited the tournament without conceding a single goal. I'm not sure how often that happens.
Yeah. Yeah, they kind of, I think, have high hopes for the team, but it often ends in disappointment. Well, we can see from their Copa America history that they did quite poorly in the last millennium, but they passed the group stage in all but one Copa America since 1991, and that kind of positions them in the top half of South America. And so we can see that they're reaching the World Cup a bit more regularly. They do have very high expectations for themselves, but as in the 1994 World Cup, where they came in with really high hopes, only to see it end badly, they are prone to disappointment. 2015 saw them fail to pass the group stage. And 2018, I don't know if you remember this, but it started and ended poorly, losing to Japan in the opening minutes. And then, as you mentioned, kind of sullying their reputation with an ill-tempered performance against England. 2019, again, kind of forming a pattern here, saw them looking strong in the group stage, just like in 2011, but then suffering a disappointing loss in the quarterfinals. So do you see that kind of continuing, Connor?
I think it may, and I'll get into that when we talk about the players in just a minute here.
Okay, well then let's move on to their recent performance. Again, these friendlies are not very recent, but we'll take a quick look.
Yeah, friendlies taking place towards the end of 2019. They've mostly played fellow South American competition. They won their two most recent friendlies against Peru and Ecuador, both 1-0, but they failed to win their 4 friendlies before that.
All right, well, let's take a look at 2022 World Cup qualifying and see if they've gotten any better since then.
Well, in fact, it's been a bit more of the same kind of inconsistent results. From their 6 games, they so far have 2 wins, 2 draws, and 2 losses, which positions them in 5th out of the 10 teams after 6 games played. So within there's some decent results. They won 3-0 away to Peru and also tied Argentina, but some poor results as well. A 3-0 home loss to Uruguay. And then, as we had mentioned, a hammering 6-1 loss away to Ecuador.
Oof. That's all I have to say about that. Do you want to move on to players?
Yeah. So their top goal scorer in World Cup 2022 qualifying is Luis Muriel. Also on that list is Duvan Zapata, and both play for Atalanta in Italy. Radamel Falcao is Colombia's leading goal scorer in their history, but he's injured and so won't be participating in this tournament. as is James Rodriguez.
Oof, again.
Yeah, so both of them have not been named in the final squad. Even though Falcao's getting up there in age, those are two massively important players for them. So I think that might temper their expectations and probably their results in this tournament as well.
Yeah, well, we talked about kind of their ill temper, and actually, I don't think Yerry Mina is a particularly ill-tempered guy, but he does seem to get a lot of red cards, and I think he was in the midst of that kind of scrapping with the English players. Were you going to talk about that here?
Only to mention that he does have one red card in qualifying so far, and you're right, he was involved in a bit of the fracas in the England game. But yeah, sometime in tournaments, ill discipline can let the team down. They have been prone to red cards in major tournaments.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes from their kind of high expectations of themselves that they get frustrated when they find themselves losing, maybe.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our third team, Ecuador.
Ecuador.
Their
Okay.
nickname
Oh,
is,
yes, the nicknames.
yes, their nickname is La Tri, which basically means the tricolor, which alludes to their bright yellow, blue, and red flag, as well as their bright jerseys of the same color.
Right. Okay. Yes, they have nice colors. Mind you, most teams in the world could name themselves tricolor.
Very true.
Okay, let's take a look at the four parts of the team of the close look, the tournament participation and overview of major achievements. For the most part, they have been among the weaker teams in South America, and their main advantage, which we've talked about, is the altitude of their country. So not quite as much as Bolivia. I couldn't believe as high as Quito is, how much higher La Paz in Bolivia is. But it still gives them an advantage, but probably a bit unfairly blamed for being good at home and poor away, because I think they do okay away. But if we look at their World Cup history, they didn't enter the World Cup until 1962, and then they didn't qualify for the World Cup until 2002, but have since qualified for 3 of the 5 cups. So a bit more than just home advantage to that. And looking at the Copa America, they didn't enter until 1939. And then they were one of the lowest teams actually for the whole their whole history for the most part. But they have passed the group stage 4 times, and their best result is 4th place, which they earned twice. Both times they were hosting the Cup. Getting into the World Cup history, they didn't come close to qualifying. Maybe in 1966 they came close when they had a playoff, but they didn't reach the Cup until 2002. This proved a strong period, as they not only reached the Cup in 2006 again, but they passed the group stage that time. That was the only time they passed the group stage, in 2006, which made everyone fear that the era was over. But when they reached the Cup again in 2014, every Ecuadorian was happy again. However, 2018 proved to be their weakest campaign since the start of the 10-group large group qualifying. That started in 1994, and 2018 was their worst result, with an 8th place finish. Sorry, I probably took some of your lines there, Connor.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, the recent performance there.
Yeah, so I'll just rewind briefly to 2014 when they did qualify for the World Cup. They qualified automatically in 4th place, but they were helped perhaps somewhat by the fact that South America got an extra spot in that World Cup due to Brazil hosting. Otherwise, 4th place might have been a playoff spot. However, they were the only South American team out of 6 not to advance the groups past the group stage. They lost to Switzerland, beat Honduras, and tied France, but that wasn't enough for them to make it to the round of 16.
That's right. The South Americans did really well, which kind of reinforces our kind of difference between European and outside of European competitions.
Absolutely. And then 2018, as you mentioned, was a very weak campaign. They finished third bottom. They recorded just 6 wins from their 18 games, along with 2 draws and 10 losses.
Yeah, the 8th place finish there kind of replaced their worst finish of 6th place to that point. Let's take a look at the Copa America record. Even their good spell in the 2000s in World Cup competition doesn't appear in their Copa America results. From their first entry in 1939 into the competition, and I should point out the competition has no qualification. It's an automatic entry for all CONMEBOL teams. So it comes down to reaching the cup is no achievement. Passing the group stage is achievement, and they've only done it 4 times. I said in 1993 and in 1959 and 93, they hosted and finished 4th for their best results. Otherwise, they reached the quarterfinal in 1997 and again in 2016. From 1999 to 2015, they were knocked out in the group stage and, in fact, registered only 2 wins and 1 draw. That's very much out of balance with their World Cup record, where they reached 3 of the 4 cups during the same period. Naturally, their home record is strong because of that altitude. But during this period, they had 3 wins and 2 draws on the road in 2002 and 2 wins and 2 draws away in 2010. Other campaigns were weak, but they had at least 2 non-losses. But they rectified this in the 2016 Copa America by going undefeated in the group stage, including a draw with Brazil and passing the group stage. But 2018 returned to their poor pattern. No, I think I'm stepping on your toes again.
As long as we cover the material, that's fine.
Anyway, it's 2019, not 18. So go ahead.
Yeah. 2016. As you said, they went undefeated in the group stage. They finished 2nd in their group behind Peru, but they lost to the USA in the quarterfinal. So after passing the group stage, they got no further. And yeah, 2019, it kind of returned to their very poor pattern in the Copa America. They finished in last place in their group, losing to Uruguay and Chile, and managed only a draw with guest Japan in the final game, and a Japanese B team at that.
Yeah, so they'll be looking to improve here.
Interestingly, Ecuador do host the 2024 Copa America. When they've hosted previously, they've done well. So it'll be interesting to see, kind of looking forward to 2024, what hosting means for them in this tournament.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. I think the other teams should arrive like 2 years early to get used to the air. All right. In summary, the differing fortunes in World Cup versus Copa America is actually a bit uncanny. Again, 3 World Cups since the turn of the century, and really a terrible Copa America record over the same period. And when they had a good Copa America in 2016, it was followed by their very worst World Cup campaign. So you never really know what you're going to get. Even within a campaign, that campaign started well with 4 wins, but then deteriorated into 6 straight losses at the end. So it's really kind of hard to put a finger on which version of Ecuador is going to come out. Maybe the recent performances will shed a little light.
Yeah, in their friendly games in 2019, They tended to beat smaller teams they played, like Trinidad and Bolivia, and lose to stronger teams like Colombia and Argentina. They did play a friendly in March of this year. That was a 2-1 win against Bolivia.
Okay, well, that's an interesting kind of battle of the teams, battle of the high altitude teams.
Yeah.
How about the 2022 World Cup qualifying so far?
Yeah, it's been mixed for them. They have 3 wins and 3 losses. It's still good enough to see them sitting in 3rd place overall, though. They did win 3-2 away to Bolivia. Bolivia with their formidable home record, but of course not having quite the same high altitude advantage over Ecuador as they would have over other teams. The standout result is that 6-1 win against Colombia. But in their most recent games, they lost to both Brazil and Peru. So they head into this tournament on the back of 2 straight losses.
Yeah, I mean, considering they've played the top 4 teams there and are currently sitting in 3rd, it's not looking too bad.
No, not at all. Yeah, 9 points from 6 games is a decent return. If they can maintain consistency, that they could kind of return to their good World Cup qualifying record.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, that is Ecuador. No, it isn't. We're going to take a quick look at their players before we move on. It's Michael Estrada up at the top. And actually, I don't really recognize some of those names. I wonder if they're kind of turning over.
Yeah, Michael Estrada, he's our leading goal scorer in World Cup qualifying so far with 3 goals. He's 25 years old, so relatively young, and he plays in Mexico with Toluca. Angel Mina, who has 2 goals in qualifying, he also plays in Mexico with Leon. Another name on the list is Moises Caycero. He's 19 years old and plays with Brighton in the Premier League. I'm not sure if he's made many appearances for them. But still, at the young age of 19, he has 5 appearances and 1 goal already. So perhaps a player to keep an eye on for the future.
Yeah, well, a lot of players scoring there, and we can't go through them all, unfortunately. Their first 13 goals in qualifying was scored by 10 different players.
It's always good to get depth scoring. And yeah, for a team like Ecuador that perhaps lacks kind of a very prolific center forward, they're going to need that in the Copa America.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, maybe we should move on to Peru. How about nicknames for Peru?
Yeah, their nickname is Blanquiroja, which, if said properly, means the red and white one. Of course, alluding to their flag and the colors of their kits.
All right. Well, we won't mix them up with Poland or Switzerland with that nickname, will we?
No.
Okay, let's do the first of our 4 parts of the team preview. They're a senior team. They participated in the 1930 World Cup, and they joined the Copa America in 1927, the first one being in 1916, so about 10 years into it. They withdrew or did not enter the World Cup, though, from 1934 to 1954. That's 4 tournaments. Withdrawing even from 1950 when it was in Brazil. But they played most of the Copa Americas during that period. They joined the South American Championship in 1927. So, as I said, they missed the first 10 years. They missed 4 more times between 1945 and 1967, but otherwise participated consistently. They won the tournament in 1939, having hosted, and then in 1975, which we'll see was a strong period for Peru.
Great. Do you want to take us through their World Cup history?
You bet. They've reached the World Cup 5 times. The first one in 1930, and then 3 of the 4 cups between 1970 and 1982, but then not again until 2018. Their strongest period, as this makes clear, was in the 1970s, They were using Brazilian coaching and tactics, and they reached the quarterfinal in 1970 and the second round in 1978. They had basically two group stages, so they passed the first one. Since 1982, they had only come close to qualifying in 1998, where they finished tied on points with Chile, who advanced in fourth place. But Peru was far behind on goal difference. The full qualification runs from 2002 to 2014 saw them finishing eighth or lower, last place in 2010 when they lost all games on the road. That was their worst qualifying campaign. 2018 saw them in eighth place for most of the campaign until a strong finish pushed them into fifth and an intercontinental playoff win over. Well, that's your business, Connor. Can you take us through the modern history?
Yeah, the intercontinental playoff win came over New Zealand, and that got them into their first World Cup in 36 years.
Wow.
I found Peru to be a very entertaining team at the 2018 World Cup. They dominated their opening game against Denmark and actually missed a first half penalty and ended up losing 1-0. And then they lost by the same scoreline to France, but they gave France a good game. They beat Australia in their final game, so they got the points they kind of deserved, but they'd already been eliminated at that point.
Yeah, I was very impressed with them too, but I wondered if they were being naive, kind of. I think, is it Luis Advincula? I'm not sure I'm saying. Is one of the fastest guys in the world. And they were just stunning to watch, but maybe they kind of ran out of gas quickly, do you think?
That was the impression I got. Yeah, especially against Denmark. They were just all over them in the first half, but Denmark kind of played a patient game and got the better of them at the end.
Yeah, nevertheless, they are a lot of fun. Let's take a look at their Copa America history. It's actually not much different. In the early years, their biggest result was winning as host in 1939. Otherwise, they managed a few third-place finishes. Their strong period in World Cup history reflects here too by winning the Cup in 1975 and reaching the semi-final in the following two competitions. Here too, though, it was a long drought after 1983, reaching the quarterfinals at best, except for a slightly better fourth-place finish in 1997. Recent times, the best period was third-place finishes in 2011 and 2015. And you're going to take us to the 2019 tournament, or maybe a bit before?
Yeah, so in 2016, Peru eliminated Brazil in the group stage to top their group. However, they lost on penalties to Colombia in the quarterfinals, which was a bit of a dip in form, having reached the semifinals in the two previous tournaments. In 2019, they finished third in their group of four, behind Brazil and Venezuela, but that was still enough for them to squeak into the knockout round. There, they beat Uruguay on penalties after a scoreless draw, and then beat Chile 3-0 in the semifinals, a big upset, to advance to their first Copa America final in 44 years. There, they met Brazil for the second time in the competition, having lost 5-0 to them in the group stage. And in the final, they lost again, this time by a scoreline of 3-1.
That was kind of unexpected, but again, pretty exciting there too. So actually, they're currently enjoying a good period. It doesn't quite match their strong period in the 1970s and early 80s. But, you know, second place in 2019 is pretty good. And then their World Cup qualification. So they're looking pretty good. Do you think that gives them any hope going into this Cup, Connor?
I think they'll have to be optimistic. They performed well in this tournament recently. And the 2018 World Cup is something for any team to build on, especially one that's not used to reaching the finals of the major tournament. So, yeah, Well, their good period will come to an end at some point, but hopefully for them, they can carry it through at least this tournament and then into the next World Cup qualifying, which we'll take a look at shortly.
Okay, yeah, let's see if their recent history kind of gives us any insight. The friendlies in 2019, Connor?
Yeah, not too much to speak of there. Again, mostly playing friendlies against other South American teams, but they did beat Brazil 1-0 on the road in September 2019. So that was a good result, but they have lost most of their recent friendlies, mostly by a score of 1-0.
Yeah, a bit of payback for losing in the final the previous summer. Let's take a look at the 2022 World Cup qualifying, and ouch, doesn't look great there. And I think we're missing a game.
Yeah, just missing one from the graphic, but yeah, it hasn't looked good so far. Their record is just 1 win, 1 draw, and 4 losses from their 6 games, and actually they've lost all 3 of their games at home. However, those losses have come to Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia, so they've played some of the stronger teams in the group, but they'll have to pick up points quickly if they want to replicate their feat from 2018.
Yeah, great. Do you have the result of that most recent game? Or I'm just finding it here. Okay. No, actually, it's kind of significant because in their most recent game, in their second game in June, it was a 2-1 win in Ecuador, believe it or not.
Oh, against the team they're playing here. Yeah, that game must have been played just yesterday or the day before.
Yeah.
Very recently. But yeah, their first win, so it kind of kickstarts their tournament, or in the qualification at least. But a good result.
I mean, this is looking pretty grim. So this at least kind of pulls them out a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry if I talked over you there. Let's go to look at their scorers, and here are some familiar names. I think I was talking about Luis Advincula. I think he's under 10 seconds in sprinting, or he has some. Anyway, he's very fast.
Yeah, he has one of their 6 goals in qualifying so far. The leader, though, is Andre Carrillo with 3 of the 6. He plays for Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia. And actually, Christian Cueva, who's an influential midfielder and was quite good in the World Cup, he plays in Saudi Arabia as well for Al Fateh. So 2 of their top players, playing in Saudi Arabia, which is a bit unusual.
Yeah, I think Carrillo and Advincula are actually classed as defenders. I'm not dead sure though.
Yeah, I'd have to double check that. Another name that will be familiar, you mentioned him, is Paulo Guerrero. He's 37 years old, so he's getting up there in age, and he's currently playing with Internacional in Brazil. He has 38 goals and 104 appearances. So while he's coming to the end of his career, he still could be a player that they'll look to for goals.
Yeah, he's a really huge name. He was actually the guy who committed the handball that annoyed Brazil so much in 2015, and a huge name for Peru. Okay, let's move on, shall we, to Venezuela?
Right.
Okay. What about the nickname?
So their nickname is La Vino Tinto, which means the Burgundy. And even though Burgundy is not a color on their flag, they wear striking kind of burgundy or maroon jerseys, which kind of sets them apart in South America.
Yeah, very outstanding jersey. Well, they are the newest team in South America. They were the last team to enter into qualifications. They joined the World Cup in 1966 and the Copa America in 1967. They've never qualified for a World Cup, and they've only really come close once. We'll talk about that. And they had never passed the group stage of Copa America until 2007. But they've done it 4 out of the last 5 times. So some improvement there for Venezuela.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and of course that means they're currently in their strongest period. But we'll look at the World Cup record first. It's been evident in World Cup play only in terms of their qualification. From 1966, they earned only one result. That's a win. They earned one result, a cup, basically, one result per qualification. More usually a draw at home. And in every qualification campaign, I'm sorry, I'm getting lost here. In 1966 and 1990, they lost all games. So what I'm trying to bumble through here is that they usually get a home draw and that's it. And in a couple of campaigns, they lost all the games. I'm just going to put that behind me and move on. In 1998, they earned only 3 points, and they came last, a full 14 points behind Bolivia. But since 2002, they've been consistently improving. They earned 16 points that year, then 18 in 2006, and 22 points in 2010. And although it was a bit lower in 2014 with 20 points, that was their best finish, sixth place. So just one short of the advancing spot. And I think you're going to take us into 2018.
Yeah, unfortunately for Venezuela, they weren't able to build on that good qualification campaign in 2014. 2018 saw a poor run. They finished last with just 12 points. That's only 2 wins from 18 games. So they did go undefeated in their last 4 games. But small consolation for a team that, finished at the bottom of the table.
Yeah, well, let's hope they get to a World Cup. In Copa America, the improvement didn't show until they hosted in 2007, and they passed the group stage for the first time there. In fact, it was even worse than World Cup play, losing all games in 5 out of the 12 campaigns to 2004. Worse still, they didn't win a single game in Copa America tournament during that whole period from 1966 to 2004. And
Wow.
it's incredible. And actually, that makes the fact that they went undefeated in 2007 very unexpected and quite remarkable, even if they were the host. More impressively, though, they did the same thing in the next campaign, going undefeated in the group stage. And they beat Chile in the quarterfinals and took Paraguay to penalties in the semifinals to eventually finish fourth. By far their best result there in 2011. And I'm just going to hand it over to you for the next few tournaments.
Yeah. So although they failed to pass the group stage in 2015, the following 2 cups in 2016 and 2019 did see them pass the group stage. Again, this amounts to a very strong period in their history. In 2016, they beat Jamaica and Uruguay and tied Mexico, so to finish with 7 points. But they lost to Argentina in the quarterfinal. At the 2016 Copa America Centenario. In 2019, they again went undefeated in the group stage, including picking up a draw with Brazil. But once again, they lost to Argentina in the quarterfinals. So that's where they've gone out and who they've gone out to in those last 2 tournaments.
Right. So, yeah, we've seen a big change in the last 15 years for Venezuela. The question is whether they can kind of maintain that and at least be competitive, for say 7th, 6th place in that tough Copa America group. But they're no longer the feeble team that they basically were in the previous century. Let's take a look at their recent performance here. They actually didn't play a lot of friendlies in 2019?
No, not a lot. They played 4 towards the end of the year. They tied Colombia and then beat Bolivia, Trinidad and Tobago, and then Japan. So some good performances to take into 2022 World Cup qualifying.
Yeah, that win against Japan might be the best result there.
Yeah, 4-1 on the road, so very impressive.
Uh-huh. Okay, let's move on to World Cup qualification, the 2022, and see how they're doing.
Yeah, they would have loved to take their performances in those friendlies into qualifying where it matters, but they haven't quite been able to do that. They got off to a rough start, losing their first 3 games and failing to score a goal. They picked up a win against Chile following that. They then lost on the road to Bolivia before tying Uruguay at home. They currently sit tied for last place in the standing with a record of 1 win, 1 draw, and 4 losses. So the same record as Peru. They do have a slightly better goal difference, but it's a bit of a hole that they have for themselves and will need to dig themselves out of if they're able to dig themselves out very far at all.
Yeah, they'll hope to improve that performance in the Cup. And let's take a look at some of their players there. They only have 3 goals so far. Do you want to tell us what you know there?
Yeah, 2 of those goals are from defenders, Luis Mago and John Chancellor. But the other name, Solomon Rondon, he's a record goal scorer. He scored 31 goals in 82 games for his country. He currently plays in China, but previously played with West Brom and Newcastle in the Premier League. And then he played in Russia and Spain before that. And I think it's no coincidence that their good performances of recent years have kind of risen along with Solomon Rondon, who's been just a hugely influential player for Venezuela.
Yeah, I remember we were sitting around a couple of years ago hoping that they would be transferred from Newcastle to Cardiff.
Yeah, it looked like it at one point in time. Another player I'll mention, though, is Joseph Martinez. He's 28 years old and he plays with Atlanta United in the United States. He's got 11 goals in 53 appearances, so he's another kind of more influential player for them.
Right. Yeah, he had one or 2 really good seasons in the MLS there.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Well, that brings us to the end of our team-by-team preview. And so now we're going to move on to part 3 and the prospects for each team. Is Brazil going to win it, Connor?
I think they'll certainly win the group, and they would be my odds-on favorites to win the tournament as well. They really seem in full command in South America. Looking at their 2019 Copa America title and their dominant World Cup 2018 qualifying run. And of course, they're 6 wins from 6 in qualification so far. So they do seem a bit of a step ahead of certainly all the other teams in this group. So what do you think for Brazil? Do you see them dominating the group, or do you see them kind of putting a run together once they get later on in the tournament? Because, of course, 4 out of 5 teams advance, so they probably don't need to expend maximum effort to get out of the group.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sometimes annoyed by kind of the sassy behavior, especially of Neymar. And I feel like overconfidence. I mean, they've really defeated themselves in some of the tournaments over the past decade. But I do feel a bit more soberness coming into this cup, maybe because they're in a bit of a slump. I mean, I say that they won the 2019 Cup, but certainly in World Cups it was the crushing weight of pressure that seemed to undermine them, and I feel that's been lifted a little bit. I mean, look how far they are ahead in World Cup qualifying. It's hard to see any winner beyond them or perhaps Argentina.
Yeah, I agree. It's hard to keep a good team down, and they've been in perhaps what could be described as a slump kind of over the past 10 years, but they could be emerging from that with some really strong performances over over probably a period of 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, I think this is a tough group though, because Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Venezuela. We've kind of seen them all improving in the last 20 years. They were all kind of feeble in the previous century. I don't mean to be insulting there, but they were all much weaker in the previous century than they are now. And I don't think they'll challenge Brazil, but I do think this is a very tough group of teams in the group.
I agree with that. I don't see any of the other 4 teams challenging Brazil, but I do think it will be competitive among the 4 of them. I think you can make arguments for each of the 4 teams that that they have improved recently and that they have had some good results and perhaps will look to be getting to the semifinals of this tournament. But you can also find some knocks against each team. Peru and Venezuela have had a very slow start to World Cup qualifying. Colombia are missing 2 of their most influential players. And Ecuador, of course, don't tend to do well in Copa America. So there's some question marks against all these teams, some pros, some cons. So I see it being quite competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think on paper, even with the 2 missing players, you'd have to put Colombia first. But they tend to disappoint quite a lot of the time, whereas teams like Peru and Ecuador can really put forward a strong performance. Ecuador not so much in Copa America, but they certainly have the talent to challenge Colombia for second spot.
Yeah, and they've proven that in 2022 World Cup qualifying so far, sitting in 3rd place overall. I do agree that despite missing a couple key players, Colombia would be favorites for second. Looking at the other 3 teams, who do you see being the team that possibly misses out and fails to advance?
Yeah, well, we looked at the rankings and the odds before, and I got to say, I completely disagree with Ecuador being 53rd. I think that's outrageous. I would say they're the 3rd strongest team here, and I think Peru. I think you disagree here. I think Peru may be a bit overrated. Their recent form has been so poor, but I guess you can't overlook that they reached the final and the 2018 World Cup. But in terms of recent form, I see Peru possibly finishing at the bottom.
Yeah, that's interesting. That would be in line with how ELO sees it. They have Venezuela 29th and Peru 32nd, and they're similarly close in FIFA rankings. I find it hard to see a Peru team, though, that reached the World Cup and got to the final of Copa America last year, failing to advance from this. I do see Venezuela as the weakest team, and would probably be the team I would pick to not make it. Peru's start to World Cup qualifying hasn't been good, but I think looking a little further back over 2 or 3 years, you'd have to say that their results have been consistently pretty good, and that perhaps the recent form is a bit of an aberration.
No way. No, it's very interesting to see the difference between the rankings and the odds. The odds agree with you completely, and of Venezuela really far back, having half the chance of winning the cup as Peru, whereas, as you pointed out, all the ELO ranking systems both favor Venezuela, and it's tight in the FIFA too. I agree with it being tight. But enough chatter, Connor. Give it to me straight.
All right. Well, I'm going to say Brazil to finish first, Colombia to finish second, and I'm kind of confident about those 2 teams. I'm going to go with Peru to finish 3rd, Ecuador 4th, and Venezuela last. And that's partly due to Ecuador's poor form in this tournament, and Peru's recent good form, notwithstanding a poor start to qualification.
Yeah, very well may work out that way. And I got to say, I'm just kind of making it up on the spot here. Brazil first for me, Colombia second, but not as convincingly as maybe people will think. I'm going to put Ecuador third, despite their Copa America record. And I'm pipping Venezuela over Peru. As much as I like Peru, someone's got to finish last, and it can't be Venezuela.
All right, well, we'll see. So we talked about Brazil's chances to win this tournament. Do you see any of the other 4 teams possibly surprising and going all the way?
I think there could be players that emerge, and I think there could be teams that emerge. You know, we talked about Peru's fast attack. They reached the final, so how can you be confident in your predictions when things like that happen? But no, I gotta say, I think the most maybe one of them will reach the semifinals, but I think the other team, the other group has stronger top teams.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, Uruguay, Chile, and Argentina in Group A in particular. And yeah, I don't really see any of the other teams in Brazil getting to the final, really. But that said, we've seen a lot of penalty shootouts in recent Copa America tournaments, and sometimes that gives the underdog a bit of a chance, penalties being a great equalizer. So it could come down to that in the latter stages too, and maybe someone gets lucky or perhaps spend some extra time practicing their penalty kick.
Yeah, it could be Paraguay and Brazil in penalties again, and Paraguay winning.
Yeah,
winning. You never do know, but yeah, definitely on paper, you'd have to say Argentina and Brazil in the final. I don't see any of the other teams kind of strong enough to make anything different happen.
Yeah, I would agree, but it should be a good tournament. We'll see lots of games, lots of teams playing each other, and then the tournament will really heat up in the knockout round. And the ranking where you finish in your group matters, because the higher you finish in your own group, the weaker team you play in the second group. So even though 4 out of 5 advance, there's still a lot of incentive to take these games seriously.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the tournament. South American soccer is always a bit of fun, and I can't wait to watch a few games. It's great talking to you about this, Connor. Do you have any closing words?
That's it for me. Thanks very much, Kevin.
Okay, thanks, Connor. And let's talk maybe, well, we don't know what our next podcast is going to be. So we'll just have to leave it at that for now. Maybe a Gold Cup preview or maybe not.
We'll see what the future holds. But for now, let's enjoy some soccer.
You betcha. Bye.
Bye.